The clatter of dishes and the hum of conversation filled Mason's grill on a packed Friday night when it happened. A table of young men near the open kitchen window began calling out to her, their voices dripping with mockery. "Hey, chef, bet you look better out of that uniform," one of them jeered. Another flicked a piece of bread at her, while the tallest one leaned into the counter with his phone out filming as he made a crude thrusting gesture. Laughter roared from the table, cutting through the restaurant's warm atmosphere like a knife. Customers looked away embarrassed, but no one intervened. Her name was Carla Torres, 32 head chef and proud owner of the restaurant she had built from scratch over the last 6 years. She'd survived grueling shifts, relentless bills, and the uphill climb of earning a reputation in a cutthroat industry. But in one humiliating minute, 3 drunk punks had reduced her to a punchline. The sting wasn't just in their words, it was in the way they looked at her, like she was less than human. Her hands trembled as she plated the next order, and she forced her face into neutrality, not giving them the meltdown they were clearly fishing for. Yet every second burned. She'd seen this type before. Overconfident young men, all swagger and cruelty, who thought their drunken antics were harmless jokes. The other staff avoided eye contact, sensing her fury simmering just beneath the surface. Her sous chef Malik muttered under his breath, "Ignore them, boss. Not worth it." But Carla's jaw was clenched so tightly it ached. She had fought too hard for this kitchen, too hard for her dignity to let anyone tear it down without consequence. They didn't know who she was, what she was capable of. She remembered nights spent training under Chef Valdez, who drilled into her not only culinary precision, but the discipline of knife-handling skills she could execute blindfolded. She thought of her father, who taught her never to back down when someone tried to take her respect. The bullies finished their meal, tossing crumpled bills on the table without tipping, still snickering as they left. But Carla knew deep down they weren't finished. Drunk men with inflated egos rarely stopped at just one round of harassment. She felt the slow burn of something ancient and dangerous waking in her chest. She wasn't just going to endure this. No, she was going to make sure that when they thought of her again, it wouldn't be with laughter. It would be with the kind of fear that stuck in their bones. Her moment was coming, and she would be ready. Carla closed up the kitchen earlier than usual that night, not because the orders had slowed, but because her mind wouldn't stop replaying the scene. Every laugh, every word, every phone flash, they looped in her head like an ugly reel she couldn't turn off. She sat alone at the prep table, the stainless steel cold under her forearms. The smell of seared steak and garlic butter still hung heavy in the air, but it didn't comfort her tonight. Instead, it reminded her how much pride she usually felt in this place, and how quickly those 3 had tried to strip that away. Her thoughts drifted back to the long road here. At 19, she had started as a dishwasher, hustling for tips at side catering gigs, working 2 jobs to put herself through culinary school. Every scar on her hands told a story of late nights, burns cuts, and the sheer will it took to be taken seriously as a woman in a male-dominated kitchen. She'd dealt with rough customers before, but never this public, never this degrading. Her phone buzzed. A text from Malik. Saw them outside the bar across the street. "They're bragging about you. Got a video too." Her stomach dropped, but not from shame. It was from a cold, sharp clarity. She knew exactly how this would play out. Those jerks would share it online. The video would make its rounds, and she'd be another headline in the endless scroll of viral humiliation. She could already hear her mother's voice in her head. "Mija, never let anyone write your story for you." Carla rose from the table, moving through her kitchen like a soldier in familiar terrain. The hum of the fridge, the faint click of the pilot light. Everything felt heightened sharper. She opened the knife drawer, her fingers brushing over the wooden handles, each one balanced and cared for like an extension of her own body. Her gaze settled on the chef's knife, 8 inches of polished German steel. She pulled it free, feeling the weight in her hand. She didn't plan to hurt anyone. That wasn't who she was. But she wasn't going to be anyone's victim either. If they came back, she'd make sure they understood exactly what kind of woman they were dealing with. Outside, the faint sound of rowdy voices drifted in through the propped open back door. Malik's text was right. They were still around, still drunk, still laughing. Carla tightened her grip on the knife and placed it on the counter beside her cutting board. Then she leaned forward, palms flat, breathing deep. Her humiliation had hardened into something unshakable. If those boys were stupid enough to step back into her kitchen, they'd find out the difference between mocking a chef and provoking one. The front door chimed just past midnight. Mason's grill had been closed for over an hour, but the soft, yellow glow of the kitchen light still spilled onto the sidewalk. Carla looked up from the prep station where she'd been slicing carrots in measured, deliberate strokes. She didn't have to peek around the corner to know who it was. The voices gave them away instantly. "Thought we'd stop by for a private show," one of them drawled, slurring his words. The others laughed, that same ugly, throaty sound she'd heard hours ago. Footsteps scraped against the tile as they wandered deeper inside, ignoring the closed sign on the door. Carla stayed where she was, her back to them, the knife glinting under the kitchen lights. She didn't flinch, didn't speak, just kept slicing with slow precision. Thunk, 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 each cut sharp and even. The sound carried through the quiet restaurant like a metronome, deliberate and steady. One of them sauntered closer, leaning against the stainless steel counter. "What's for dinner?" "Chef Hope, it's more than carrots." His grin was wide, but his eyes darted to the blade in her hand. Without looking at him, Carla set the carrot aside and picked up a tomato. She began dicing it with lightning speed, the knife moving in a blur, up, down, until perfect cubes sat neatly on the board. Then she looked up, finally meeting his gaze. "You ever see what this knife can do?" Her voice was calm, almost conversational, but her eyes had a hard edge. The laughter behind him faltered. The second bully nudged the third, murmuring something under his breath. Carla stepped back from the cutting board and flipped the knife in her palm with practiced ease, the blade catching the light before she caught it again by the handle. The motion was fluid, controlled, beautiful even, and it carried a quiet threat. "You boys think you're funny," she continued, walking toward them with measured steps. "But in this kitchen, I'm the one who decides how sharp things get." The tallest one, clearly the ringleader, tried to mask his unease with a smirk. "We're just playing sweetheart. No need to thunk." Carla stabbed the tip of the knife into the cutting board so hard it stood upright, vibrating from the force. The sound snapped through the room like a gunshot. Silence. She leaned on the counter, hands flat, staring each of them down. Playtime's over. For the first time that night, none of them had anything to say. The swagger drained from their posture, replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. And Carla finally felt the shift she'd been waiting for. The silence stretched thick and heavy, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator. The 3 men stood frozen, their smirks slipping into uneasy half-grins that didn't quite reach their eyes. Carla didn't move from behind the counter, but the way she stood, shoulders square, chin slightly lifted, radiated control. She reached down, grasped the knife handle, and slid it free from the cutting board in one smooth motion. Then, without breaking eye contact, she began spinning it between her fingers, blade flipping handle, catching blade flipping again, each turn perfectly controlled. The steel flashed in the light, a hypnotic dance that made it impossible to ignore how steady her hands were. "Ever work in a real kitchen?" she asked softly, her tone almost casual. None of them answered. You learn speed, precision, and exactly how deep steel can cut before it hits bone. A nervous chuckle escaped from the one nearest the door, but it died quickly when she shifted her stance and took a step closer. She didn't lunge or raise her voice. She didn't have to. The confidence in her movement spoke louder than any threat could. The ringleader tried to reclaim the upper hand. "Look, we didn't mean any harm." Carla cut him off with a sharp flick of the knife, pointing the tip toward him for just a heartbeat before twirling it back into a resting grip. "You meant to humiliate me. You meant to turn me into a joke for your little video. Now you're here drunk thinking you're still in control." She tilted her head slightly. "But you're not." She set the knife down, not as a concession, but as a statement. Then she grabbed another from the magnetic strip on the wall. This one slimmer a boning knife. She tossed it from hand to hand, showing the kind of comfort only someone who'd held a blade for thousands of hours could have. Her movements grew faster, her motions deliberate as she diced another tomato in a blur of motion. The cuts were so quick they were almost invisible, the blade never hesitating, never nicking her skin. When she was done, each piece was identical, uniform, perfect. She didn't say a word while she worked, letting the sound of the knife hitting the board, thunk, 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 fill the space between them. The man, by the counter, shifted his weight, glancing toward the door. The other two noticed. Fear, small, but growing, began to bloom in their expressions. Carla could see it, the tightening of their jaws, the darting of their eyes. Finally, she spoke again, her voice low but steady. "Here's the thing. A chef's knife isn't just for cooking. It's for survival. You should remember that before you walk into someone's kitchen thinking you own it." The weight of her words lingered. One of them muttered, "We should go," but the ringleader hesitated, caught between pride and fear. Carla didn't push. She just stared them down, her knives gleaming on the counter between them. It was enough. The fear had taken root. The ringleader's jaw worked as if he wanted to fire back, but nothing came. His friends were already edging toward the door, their bravado leaking away with every step. Carla didn't move to stop them. She just stood there, one hand resting lightly on the chef's knife, her posture calm but unyielding. They reached the doorway, and that's when she spoke clear enough for every word to cut. "Next time you want to humiliate someone for fun, make sure they can't carve you up faster than a Thanksgiving turkey." The one nearest the door glanced back, eyes wide, and stumbled into the sidewalk outside. The other two followed, muttering curses under their breath, but their voices carried none of the swagger they'd entered with. The bell above the door jingled one last time, and then it was only Carla, her kitchen, and the faint echo of their retreat. She exhaled slowly, setting the knife back on the magnetic strip. The adrenaline still buzzed in her veins, but beneath it was something else, an unshakable satisfaction. They hadn't apologized, and she hadn't needed them to. What mattered was that they'd left with a new understanding. This kitchen was hers, and she was no one's victim. Malik emerged from the back hallway, eyebrows raised. "They gone." Carla nodded. "For good, I think." He gave a low whistle. "Whatever you just did in here, they're not gonna forget it." By morning, the video they had filmed earlier that night had already surfaced online, but the comments weren't what the bullies had expected. Someone from the bar across the street had caught the tail end of their encounter in the kitchen through the window, recording the moment they backed out the door with pale faces and stammering voices. That clip was spreading faster than theirs, and the captions told the story for her "Don't mess with Chef Torres." Customers began showing up before lunch service, some coming just to shake her hand. "Saw the video," one regular said with a grin. "You're a damn legend." Carla smiled faintly, but didn't bask in the attention. The lesson had never been about the fame. It was about drawing a line and making sure it was respected. The bullies didn't return. Not that night. Not ever. But if they ever did, Carla knew she wouldn't need to raise her voice or even raise her knife. All it would take was a look, and they'd remember. Because some fear doesn't fade, it gets burned in like a scar. Respect is not given, it's earned and defended. Carla's experience was a reminder that standing up for yourself doesn't always mean shouting or swinging. Sometimes it's about holding your ground with unwavering confidence until those who try to break you realize they can't. Bullies thrive on weakness, but when they meet someone who refuses to be diminished, their power crumbles. In life, your dignity is your most valuable possession, and you have every right and every responsibility to protect it fiercely.